University, fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Dr. Navon, thank you so very much for joining us to what seems to be spiraling out of control.
Yes, but don't forget that the tension with France is not new. Since the war that started on October 7, Macron, first he came to Israel like the rest of the Western leaders, but shortly after that, he gave an interview to the BBC accusing Israel of killing women and children. And then it's going worse, from worse to worse. Don't forget that in the past 2 years, almost 2 years, he's tried 3 times to ban Israeli companies from attending defense shows in Paris. He has called for immediate ceasefires all the time, but without the victory over Hamas. A couple of weeks ago in the Elysee Palace, he hosted journalists, and one of them asked him, what about the Palestinian hostages? Not using the word prisoners, but hostages. And Macron said, yes, also the Palestinian hostages. In other words, Macron has been extremely offensive. His push for a Palestinian state. So
a diplomatic lingo here cannot sugarcoat this ideological abyss. But in a historic perspective, Dr. Navon, is it unprecedented, or do we all have this short-term memory?
We have a short-term memory. Don't forget that France, between the Six-Day War and I would say until Sarkozy, when he was elected in 2006 or 7, France was mostly hostile to Israel. Don't forget that in the 70s, under Pompidou and Giscard d'Estaing, France was hostile, and then it's when also France built a nuclear plant to Iraq that was bombed by Israel in 1981. It was built in 1976. It is France also that pushed for the PLO to be included in the negotiations after the Camp David Agreement. The Camp David Agreement, the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt, was actually condemned by France because it didn't include the PLO. We forget that. President Chirac basically contributed to the failure of the Oslo agreements when he to the negotiations in Camp David, when he said to Arafat not to agree to a ceasefire before an international commission be established against Israel. This is France. So there are actually precedents. It's getting worse because, demographically, you have today a growing population of Muslims in France, and Macron is trying to very clearly to appease them.
So it is reversible, so to speak, listening to your explanation, but we do see an impact, not just bottom up, but also the other directions, as in such events or situations invigorate to an extent the already hostile street, more anti-Semitic incidents every day, unfortunately, both in France and in Australia.
Yeah, but the problem is with Macron and also with Albanese is that, Macron basically legitimizes the demonization of Israel. I'll give you an example. He was asked recently whether or not he thought that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. And he said, well, it is for historians to decide. In other words, maybe, actually, and, accusing Israel of committing war crimes. So he actually legitimizes this demonization of Israel. And the demonization of Israel contributes to anti-Semitism, because if Israel is such a horrible country, and if the Jews in France support Israel, which most of them do, so then obviously they deserve the violence directed at them. And that's where his policy is irresponsible. And by the way, about 2 months ago, the leading newspaper in France, Le Figaro, leaked a report that was submitted to the French Ministry of the Interior about the Muslim Brotherhood, describing how the Muslim Brotherhood in France has become a very potent and powerful movement. And one of the recommendations of the report at the end of the report was for France to recognize a Palestinian state so as to, quote unquote, try to appease this hostile Muslim population in France. And Macron has basically endorsed this recommendation.
Dr. Emmanuel Navon, International Relations Lecturer at the Tel Aviv University, fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security.